Ladies and gentlemen, this is DVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. On this episode, we're looking at a story that's equal parts incendiary and contradictory. Imagine if your friend was both the arsonist who lit your house on fire and the firefighter who showed up with a garden hose. Sounds like a setup for a really bad joke, right? Well, welcome to the world of international politics. Vladimir Putin appears to be pulling off this dubious double act with a flair that only a career politician come stuntman could muster. Now, let's start by addressing the barrel of gunpowder in the room, Iran. Vladimir Putin's involvement in the country isn't as simple as help or harm. It's more like help, and then harm again, in a loop that seems almost choreographed. So, without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
Meetings between Russian and Iranian officials always smiles and handshakes. The two countries have drawn closer since the former's invasion of Ukraine. Iran has been backing Moscow's efforts up with various military equipment, such as the now infamous Shahed drones. But can this partnership go further? Does Iran trust Russia enough when it comes to its nuclear ambitions and relations with other powers? Moscow has offered to act as mediator in talks between Washington and Tehran. These would aim to at least partially resolve a long-standing feud between the two countries. Iranian media say, however, that Russia is in it for itself.
We have a situation with Iran that something's going to happen very soon. Very, very soon. You'll be talking about that pretty soon, I guess. And
Donald Trump recently threatened Iran with possible military action if it refused to talk when it comes to its nuclear program and its possible renegotiation. What's more, the US Treasury Secretary has also claimed he wants to bankrupt Iran with sanctions. Trump's words, needless to say, have not been very well received by the country's supreme leader.
Some bullying governments insist on negotiation, but their negotiation is not aimed at resolving issues. It's for domination.
The issue of Iran's nuclear program goes back many, many years. It's also not the first time that Donald Trump is involved with it. The so-called Iran nuclear deal agreed upon between Tehran and Western states in 2015 offered relief from economic sanctions in exchange for restrictions on Iran's nuclear activities. Trump later withdrew the US from the deal in 2018 during his first term, yet called it a horrible one-sided agreement which should never have been made.
And now, let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. Now, if you're wondering how someone manages to play both roles so seamlessly, let's break it down. Imagine a chef who not only sets the kitchen on fire, but also runs around with a fire extinguisher, pretending to be helpful. That's Putin for you. He's got the uncanny ability to destabilize the situations just enough to make headlines, while simultaneously positioning himself as a savior who can restore power when the chips are down. Putin's actions in Iran reflects a broader strategy, his very own kind of realpolitik. On the one hand, he is stirring up trouble, fomenting discord, and playing to the divisions. But on the other, when the world gasps at the looming threat of chaos, he's ready with his metaphorical fire blanket, offering just enough relief to remind everyone that he's still the guy in control. Now, let's talk about the inherent contradiction of this approach. There's something almost mesmerizing about watching a leader who can simultaneously be the villain and the hero. One minute, he's fueling the flames of division. The next, he's playing the role of mediator, claiming that he's the only one capable of restoring stability. The duality of this role doesn't just create headlines, it ripples through communities, affect economies, and influence the lives of millions who are left to navigate the fallout. And when a leader like Putin can orchestrate such a mix of destruction and salvation, it raises some very important questions about accountability and the true nature of power. Now, in a world where trust in leadership is already in short supply, this kind of duplicity only deepens the cynicism. When leaders like Putin operate on multiple levels, both as the instigators of conflict and the ones who promises to restore order, it forces us to question not just their motives, but the very system that allows such contradictions to flourish. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Elias Egili-Denavi, political scientist from the Adam Mickiewicz University. Hello, sir, and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, good morning to our dear audience, and it's my pleasure to be here again.
Right, so today we are looking at Russia's proposal to be the peacemaker between US and Iran. Surely they're doing it out of their goodwill, right?
Well, I mean, that's really a tricky question to start a conversation with. I mean, uh, well, when I was kind of being invited to come to this program today, I was going through the pages of history of the Iranian and Russian relation. And I told myself that I'm going to start with building on the history. So, if we want to have some refreshing insights and some factual insight based on the evidences, I guess history is the best option we've got here. We go to the 19th century and we see that the Russian has some sort of, land invasion, vast land invasion of the Iranian northern territories, and they have been in kind of fluctuations war with the Iranian central government. They took their lands via treaties, and they were just trying to have some sort of peace pacts, but according to their own interests. If we pass the 19th century, because I don't want to delve deeper into the history, and we come to the contemporary times, we can see that they haven't been that much honest with the Iranian government, and they haven't aligned their policies. With the Iranian central government. Like in 2010 and 2013, this 3-year period that we've got President Medvedev in power, we have seen that the Russians were mostly coloring their own favor by voting against the Iranian nuclear program and by not giving the S-300 air defense to Iranian military sectors. So we can see that even in the contemporary time and the contemporary history, the Russians were not that much honest with the Iranian government. This is not the only case, and this is not the only instance. Even during the revival of JCPOA in March 2022, after the comprehensive invasion, unfair invasion of Ukraine, and during the so-called revival talks regarding JCPOA, we've seen that the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs puts Iranian on the table as a means of negotiation. Lavrov said that, okay, we will try and help to solve this nuclear program via the peaceful means, but at the same time, will the Europeans and the United States give us the guarantee not to block us from having trades with the Iranian, business sector? And the answer was no. So they easily withdraw from the negotiation. Another instance is the Iran-Iraq war. During the Iran-Iraq war, the so-called Iranian ally, that is Russia, didn't help the Iranians that much. Like they were giving to the dictatorship of Iraq MiG and Soko air fighters, while they were depriving the Iranian from the necessary counter-offensive means. So this is a very brief history that I could put on the table regarding the Russians, words and Russian promises.
All right, so it does seem like when it comes to Iranian relationship with Russia, well, they're pretty much being used, abused, and then used and abused again. Now we come to this particular negotiation. Now Russia is offering to negotiate peace between the U.S. and Iran, and of course we do know that there is little doubt Russia is doing it out of its own interest. So then my question would follow, like, what would be that particular interest? Do you think Russia is perhaps throwing Washington a bone because they want something from it? Perhaps when it comes to this part of the world, does it have anything to do with the war in Ukraine?
Well, technically speaking, the war in Ukraine is absolutely on the table. Let me start this from the Iranian perspective, because the Iranians are now using the Russian as a means of deterrence, because they feel like that in Tehran, they feel like that the Russia can be used as a new and fresh means of deterrence against the Western pressure. And from the Russian perspective, that is my second argument, they're also trying to give some points to the Americans. Because as we all have seen during the past 2 weeks, Americans are giving proportionate points to the Russians, stopping the intelligence support, stopping instantly the military support, and we all have witnessed what happened in the Oval Office 2 weeks ago. So the Americans have been true to their words and actions, and now the Russians are just kind of going through their pages, going through their options to see what they can offer, and here it is. we have Iran. So we can play with it, not around the table of negotiation, but on the table of negotiation. So they're saying that how can they play a highlighted role here in the negotiation? And the highlighted role for the Russians can be to bring a peace, but with their own color. Like they can be the main mediator here and make a peaceful act with the least expenses. That's what the Americans are looking for, not to be engaged in a full-scale war or even a limited war, and not even try to nudge the Israel government towards attacking the Iranian nuclear site. So the Russians are just trying to use Iranians to answer to the favor of the Americans. So this is a favor and returning the favor. And the nuclear, issue is one of the most important points here that the Russians are playing with. And we can see that the Russians have been talking with the Iranian proxies within the last 5 months. In Syria, in Lebanon, they have, even in Palestine, with the Hamas terrorist group, they have had their negotiation with them regarding regarding their activity, regarding the support. So we can see that they have been acting parallel to the Iranian means. So when they tell the Iranian, okay, you should do this, or it's better if you do this, because they've already planted what they want to do. So here they're using the Iranian nuclear issue. If I want to wrap up my argument, I should say that they're using the Iranian nuclear issue to just make a deal with the least expenses possible. And that is, again, I repeat myself, that is what Donald Trump and the Americans are looking for.
Right, and how is that going to impact the war in Ukraine? Do you think that perhaps with this deal being done, it would bring some goodwill from the Russian side to the Americans?
Well, actually, we have this saying that says, the more the better. So if you give more points, or if you give more options, then you can ask for more options and more points. So if you can avert the Iranian nuclear program, if you can avert the regional program, then you can ask for more in Ukraine. So if you are trying to just put the force on the Ukrainian government in order to give up and surrendering the occupation of the 4 eastern provinces and just occupy them and make it lawful, then you have to give the counterpart points to the American. And this is a little bit hard to calculate, because the issues that are now on the table are a little bit vague. We only know about some specific factors. We know about the Iranian missile program, we know about the Iranian proxies, and we know about the Iranian nuclear program. And the other things are being concealed. And even the experts are not 100% aware about the other ground facts. And what the Americans are looking for at the moment is to limit the expenses. I mean, these are all some sort of diplomatic tools. I mean, the signals, the letter that Trump has sent to the Iranian government on the previous Thursday, addressing directly the Iranian supreme leader, these are all, diplomatic tools. And I should say that the Ukrainian and the Iranian sides have been excluded from the negotiation, from an international political perspective, from an academic perspective. We can see that this is the great powers negotiation. And we can see that the Russians and the Americans are negotiating and they're just trying to pursue their own national interests. And the two countries involved here have been excluded. The Iranians and the Ukrainians, they both have been excluded from the negotiation table.
Right, so this is like a pretty paradoxical situation, but thank you so much for helping us break this all down. Really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us on Eastern Express.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation.
And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East I don't want to miss. Kyiv is outraged by recent comments made by Germany's head of intelligence. Bruno Hall has warned that if the war in Ukraine ends sooner than expected, then Russia could turn its aggression on the rest of Europe.
Many Ukrainians have been left shocked by the statement, which has sparked widespread debate concerning Ukraine's future. Karl says that if the war ends before 2029 or 2030, then Russia could redirect its vast military resources and assets towards posing a serious threat to other European countries. He also suggested that Moscow currently envisions a future world order where NATO's influence has been severely pushed back. The Ukrainian side is reportedly not eager to be used as a shield against Russian aggression by the West. Kiev officials and opposition leaders have pushed back against these claims. The head of the Ukrainian National Security Council's Center for Countering Disinformation has gone so far as to say that, quote, "You will not avoid war with Russia in 4 to 6 years because you are hesitant to act now."
This year, Russia has gone for a more unorthodox approach when it comes to celebrating International Women's Day. Moscow has decided to shine the spotlight on the wives and mothers of military servicemen.
The United Russia Women's Movement, which is associated with the country's ruling party and therefore with the Kremlin, organized an event which paid respect to Russian soldiers who fell in Russia's war in Ukraine. There were many such events across the entire country, and all of them showed just how far the shadow of Moscow's invasion stretches over contemporary Russian cultural events. International Women's Day is one of Russia's most important holidays and usually focuses on women's contributions to society, science, and the workforce. It goes as far back as the early years of the Soviet Union when it was promoted as a symbol of gender equality. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, however, the holiday has been much more focused on the role women play as wives or mothers of Russian soldiers.
The peace negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan are collapsing as belligerent rhetoric has put an accord into question. Merely 4 months ago, both sides were eager to fast-track peace talks.
By the end of 2024, many observers believed that a settlement between Armenia and Azerbaijan was in sight. This hope was supported by the country's leaders acknowledging that most of the provisions for a draft peace treaty had been agreed upon. In 2025, however, it seems that the two countries are thinking more about renewed hostilities. Azerbaijani President Aliyev has been referring to Armenia as a fascist state and has been talking about territorial claims against his country's neighbor. These claims concern a strip of Armenian territory that separates Azerbaijan from the Nakhchivan exclave. Azerbaijani state media have been corroborating this narrative. Some believe that this rhetoric by Azerbaijan is part of a negotiation strategy, as one of the lingering points of the peace talks is exactly this territorial dispute. Armenia, meanwhile, has been calling up reservists in the wake of these statements, not willing to see a repeat of the capture of Nagorno-Karabakh.
Pakistan's authorities have ordered holders of the Afghan citizen card and all illegal foreigners to leave the country. They can either do so voluntarily or through deportations starting April 1st.
The recent announcement by the Pakistan government has raised concerns among the country's Afghan community about repressions should they return to their home country. Pakistan's Interior Ministry believes that the allocated time is sufficient for the departure of the foreigners in question and promised that no one will be mistreated during the process. The government has often blamed various incidents involving militant violence and other criminal activity on Afghan citizens. These accusations have been rejected by the Taliban, who currently rule Afghanistan. The Pakistani government has also accused the Taliban of sheltering extremists linked to the Pakistani Taliban group. Since late 2023, Islamabad has been repatriating foreign citizens, most of whom are Afghan nationals. The effort initially focused on foreigners without legal documentation, but has now moved on to Afghan asylum seekers who hold the Afghan citizen card.
And finally, we've arrived at the East-splaining portion of our show. This time around, we're talking about Chechnya, one of Russia's many ethnically distinct republics. Its turbulent history provides a window into how diverse the Russian Federation really is.
Chechnya is perhaps the most well-known republic in Russia's North Caucasus region. It is home to some 1.5 million people who are predominantly practitioners of Sunni Islam. The region, as well as its residents, have a long history of resisting Russian control, with the most recent well-known examples being the First and Second Chechen Wars. These took place in the 1990s, right after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Chechnya had declared its independence in the aftermath, which resulted in an invasion of the area by Russian forces. The result of both wars was widespread destruction and loss of life in the thousands. By 2003, Chechnya was forcibly reintegrated into Russia. The person currently in charge of the region is Ramzan Kadyrov, the son of the turncoat Akhmat Kadyrov, who switched sides during the Second Chechen War and joined Vladimir Putin. The younger Kadyrov has been in power since 2007 and has imposed a totalitarian regime over the region. He has been sanctioned by Western states and comes under constant criticism from human rights groups over the violations reportedly being committed under his leadership. Kadyrov has continued to support Putin's regime. One of the most prominent examples of this is his involvement in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Kadyrovite forces have been involved in the conflict on the side of the Russians. But that is not to say that there aren't Chechens who fight on the side of the Ukrainian defenders. There are also several Chechen armed volunteer formations who do so.
And that's all for this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.